Hello, everybody, and welcome to this month's Contract Administration Practice Group call. With that, I do want to hand it over to Douglas and Jim to get started with today's session. So, Doug and Jim, over to you.
Thank you, Matthew. Welcome everyone back. Hope everyone had a great summer.
That's right. Welcome back. And same for me. I hope you had a great summer. Doug and I have been really busy, and hope you have too. It's good to be busy. That's for sure. I'll throw in one thing really quickly. Please stop us at any point to bring up additional information and to share stories, to ask questions. These webinars are much better when there's some back and forth communication about various points that we bring up, and we always enjoy that part of the conversation. As Matthew said, he can let you in to have some communication, and actually if it's too much information to type, to verbalize. So please don't feel like it's an interruption. It's just an addition to the information that we welcome. So I'll get us rolling. Let's go ahead and get started with the slides, Matthew. We have started this off plagiarizing Mr. Letterman. Not sure what he's doing these days, but taking it easy and looking at the top 10 best practices for construction contract administration. And so if we look at just quickly to look at what we've done so far, number 10 was to have fun. If you don't plan for that in your office, it certainly may not happen, and it's certainly something that should take a little organizational time. Be sure to put that in place in your office and enjoy what you're doing. It's why you got into this business in the first place. Best practice number 9, remember your pants pocket, and that was a conversation about quality control and quality assurance. You know, if the clothing industry takes enough time to QC a pair of pants, we certainly ought to be doing that to our projects before we put them on the street for bidding. And that reminds me to say, Doug and I spend our time mostly talking about a delivery method of design, bid, build. So these things that you hear us discuss are mostly based on that, because that's been the majority of our experience. So best practice number 8, teamwork creates winners. Certainly our sport here is a team sport, and when we work together, we certainly accomplish much more than if we're working as individuals. Best practice number 7, hold costs in check, being sure that you understand your documents, both front-end documents, contract documents that make up the total package of the project, that you're using those to the best of your benefit, following your own examples and following your own rules and regulations as you move through the project, and being sure you strictly enforce yourself following those as well as you do those on the construction team. Best practice number 6, admitting mistakes is ethically sound. Taking the opportunity to say, hey, there's something wrong here immediately when you know it, and being the one to say, that's my bad, and I want to work as a team to get it straightened out, is certainly something that Doug and I have seen in our experiences to be a good thing. Now, it may not be what your risk management or your liability insurance carrier would tell you to do first, and certainly you shouldn't do anything without asking them first. But we've seen that as a practice, that when we admit something is wrong, it certainly is helpful. In the next slide, Matthew, best practice number 5, look at and use the documents. Please don't go out on the job without using your plans. Don't share the statement, this is the way we always do it, because in fact members of your team may not be doing it that way. They might be a new member. So best practice number 5 is to actually be sure that you're quoting and referencing what you actually have given the construction community to use. And that leads us to best practice number 4. Matthew, the next slide, which is to think about the end. And we'll take a look at the next slide. It has been said that the devil is in the details. And let me stop before we jump into this. Doug, is there anything you want to add to go back through what we've done so far before we get rolling?
No, I think you covered it pretty well, unless, Matthew, anyone from the audience has anything that they want to ask at this time.
No questions at this point, except for somebody asked about today's slides, so I did leave a comment for everybody if you don't notice. There is a handouts section of the GoToWebinar screen, and I have uploaded a PDF of today's slides for your use as well. If you don't see the handout section, at the top of your GoToWebinar option, there is a thing to click for View, and then choose Handouts from there, and then it should be on your screen.
Great. So most of us have heard this line before, that the devil's in the details, and it certainly is something that we feel like should be your mantra as you develop your plans. We talk about construction administration in these webinars, and both Doug and I have worked in firms where construction administration was a department, a set of individuals that weren't necessarily the project manager or project architect or lead architect, but a different department, a set of individuals who specialized in the portion of the work that happens outside the office. And yet we also, as people in that department, have been deeply involved in the design side of what our offices were doing, bringing that expertise from outside back into the office. So you may at times feel like we're talking about comments that should be directed to the design side of the house versus the construction administration side of the house, but we overlap those and think that whichever way your firm is set up to practice is certainly important to bring that expertise back into the office. So it certainly is an opportunity for you in working with the design team as the documents are being put together to bring your expertise to the table as those plans are developed. So let's take a look at the next slide. This is not a beauty contest, and many of the folks that I have worked with get perhaps a little sidetracked with the way the documents appear as they are on the screen, and whether they are properly proportioned and whether they're laid out properly and whether they're balanced and is there symmetry in the drawings. And gosh, who really cares? Maybe you do. Okay, that's not a problem. We don't hold that against you, but what needs to be in the field is something that is constructible and detailed and able to be followed, and not necessarily what might be the winner at a beauty contest. So let's go to the next slide, Matthew, and Doug, jump in here and at any time you want to add anything to this.
Just a couple of comments on the last slide. That should not be mistaken to think that you can be sloppy when you put the documents together. They need to be clear. They need to be readable. You are trying to convey information to the people that are going to be constructing the building. And so while having a attractive set of documents should not be your main goal, it can go a long way towards making the set more readable so that it's more easy to follow and easy to understand. So again, just don't take that to mean that you can, as long as the information is on there, it can be haphazard or disorganized. That's not what we meant by that last slide.
That's right. Absolutely. And if you take a look here, there are certainly documents that I've seen that included information that people maybe felt, designers felt was important, but could have been perhaps folded into other details or made to include much more information. So there may be some general information about structural steel, for example, that could be just as easily shown in details where you're keeping moisture, water out of the building, and as Doug said, certainly very neat, well organized, but translating information that is really important to the construction process. And for me, one of the items that I like to see is, as Doug said, additional information, concise, well done, and not just the easiest, simplest pieces of detail. I think often we tend to take the easy sections, the part that is here in the middle where we may cut a window or we may cut a door frame, a hollow metal frame, a wall section where it's a little more simple to draw, rather than up and over in the corner where the detail is pretty gnarly to figure out and very difficult and very time consuming. And so these are just ideas of images where the same information may be translated in much greater detail to offer a tool for construction in the field. Doug, anything to add?
A comment on the isometric in the upper right-hand corner. I would encourage our profession to do more of that in our construction documents. We've done it in firms that I've worked for in the past, and you can look at that and look at the detail below it and see how much more information that you are relaying when you do that isometric, and how much easier it is for someone in the field to know how pieces are to come together and how to construct it. I don't think we do that enough. I think we should do more of those type of drawings, isometrics, the perspectives, anything that kind of shows the depth and can get a better feel for how the building is constructed than just the flat 2D drawings.
Well, and you know, Doug, to add to that is as you develop those, and as Doug and I both have had the experience to be working around a table or a screen, looking at that as it's developed, not only will the process of drawing it show you places where, maybe that's not going to work as you're putting the detail together, but it certainly gives you an opportunity to inform individuals in the office what they may not have experienced in the field. We often find ourselves working with younger members of the design team who have not had that field experience for one reason or another. And these are the kind of drawings that really pop out information that give you a platform to have that kind of a discussion.
As we move to the next slide, Matthew, we did not put a poll question in here, but I just would like to throw one out at this point, and people can reply back to you in the text messages box. I just would like to get a feel for how many people have actually used an isometric or use isometric drawings like that when they put their documents together. So if anybody wants to share, please feel free.
That'd be great. And if like Doug said, if you have something to share about, if the answer is yes, you have anything that you experienced that was a plus because you did that, or conversely, if something didn't work out well because you did that. It'd be interesting to know. Are there any questions, Matthew, at this point?
No questions, but a couple of comments are polling in here from the question here. So we have a couple of people that says that it looks like Revit has definitely helped them in doing those kinds of aspects and those kinds of drawings. You'll be happy to know, I'd say at this point now, close to 75% of the people that are responding said yes. Usually for specific aspects, either for drawings of windows and detailing issues, or we have one individual here for expansion joints and canopies. But the vast majority of them that responded so far did say yes.
That's great.
It is great. Well, and it's certainly, just going along with this next slide, those complicated details can eat up a lot of construction document, production of document time within the office, particularly those firms that track hours. But it's where that time is most needed. You just don't want to leave a set of documents where the details have a lot left to be desired, because if you are not taking the time to get those correctly detailed the way you want them, if you don't figure those out, then you are certainly going to leave them to the decision of those in the field, because they've got to figure out what your intention was as best they can, using their best judgment. And what we have seen in the past is that typically falls back onto, well, this is the way we did it last time, so we'll do that again. And often not letting the current documents get in the way of that. Said another way, we all revert back to what we remember, and too often Doug and I find that that's the way things are getting put together in the field. So let's go to the next slide, Matthew, and tell us if there are any questions.
No, we did have a couple questions. There was no actual poll question on the screen for those that were confused. It was just a matter of typing in if you wanted to answer the question that Douglas put out there. And we have a comment here that came in. We could have currently used, certainly used isometric views for several details in my project. It would have greatly reduced the RFIs generated from the GC's end.
Great point. They certainly can. And, I don't know, Doug, if you want to talk about this in your experience, especially in design and construction administration, litigation, and owners' representation. But it seems that we have had periods of time where folks that are in the construction business have changed. When Doug and I started to work, it seemed that there were generational individuals, folks that were craftspeople that took great pride in what they did, whether that was masonry or sheetrock or painting, and they came to the practice in the field, the construction in the field, with great experience. And perhaps we've gone through periods of time where it wasn't that way, so that those drawings not only help inform us about what we're trying to figure out, but certainly help educate some of those that are less experienced in the field in actually trying to implement what we drew. I don't know, Doug, if you've got any experiences you want to add to that.
Well, just to kind of piggyback on that and further emphasize the use of these isometric type drawings that are more, for lack of a better word, three-dimensional and than the flat 2D drawings, is from a litigation standpoint. And remember, you're dealing with a jury of 12 folks that probably have never been involved in a construction project in their life and don't know the first thing about reading drawings. It's a whole lot easier for them to understand the isometric than the flat 2D drawing, and to get a feel for how things are supposed to go together. So that's just another benefit.
Any questions, Matthew, so far?
Nope, everyone seems to be pretty quiet today.
Good, good. Well, here are some details, some drawings of what was clearly intended and some actual photographs of interpretations of how that came together. And I just put these here to perhaps maybe prompt some conversation and some thought about what gets done in the field versus what gets drawn. And one of the things that we always seem to struggle with in our industry is how much time we spend on the job site, in the field. Were we paid to do this much or not? And I love to share this little story. Doug and I were with an owner's representative who said he had two architects working on the same project, similar projects, same building types on one campus, and he was talking about pay application review at the time. One firm reviewed the pay application in 30 minutes and was gone from the site and sent him the pay app to pay, and the other firm took 4 hours and sent him some information to follow up on and some questions that he should have as an owner on how to process that pay application. And his question to us was, who do you think I'm going to use next time? State construction projects that have similar fees for similar work. And his point was very well understood and very clear that he was getting a level of service that was clear to him from one firm that he wasn't getting from the other. Well, this is an opportunity with these sorts of details that you are including in the drawings, and how much time you spend out in the field to follow up on whether or not these things are being installed the way you intended. So Doug touched on something about litigation and whether you eventually, unfortunately, end up in a process where you have to go through that. Well, you've got your documents that you've developed that are very clear, very concise, very readable, very buildable. This is what we intended. And that's very helpful. That you were able to be in the field and observe those things also is helpful, but you're not required to do exhaustive work or inspection work. You're observing. So it's always a fine line of committing the time that you need to be there and be sure that you're able to say in the end that the project was constructed in accordance with your contract documents. Again, having concise and clear details at those very gnarly, difficult spots is certainly to your benefit. And so while these may not be exact matches on the screen, they certainly give an indication for how something was offered to be installed versus how it was left to be figured out in the field. Doug, anything you want to add, or Matthew, any questions?
Quiet on this
Nothing to add at this point. Now let's go to the next slide, Matthew.
So it's good that on this structure, good details were offered. I encourage you to go online and look at the details for the documents for the Eiffel Tower. And Doug made this comment as we started. It's not a beauty contest, but that saying that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have very clear, concise, well-organized documents. I love looking at older documents, and the first firm that I was fortunate to ever work with did their first sets of drawings on linen, and it took 5 sheets to build a high school, and that included the plumbing, electrical, mechanical drawing. The Eiffel Tower drawings are very similar in how simple it was, but how well detailed it was certainly has made the building a lasting icon. And here they are, very well organized, very readable, very concise, but very informative. So thinking about those particular places that are critical to show as you develop those details is certainly a good guide in putting your documents together. Matthew, you want to go to the next slide? And just as importantly as having those documents together, spending time with the construction team in the field is just as critical, so that you are looking through those documents as you're performing your construction administration services, having conversations with the superintendent, with the foreman, with the people on the job, and being sure that they are understanding what details are intended on conveying. No, we didn't mean to have a jog in the step. That is just a detail demarcation that was unfortunately misread. Those kinds of opportunities might come up in conversation if you're able to commit the time to the site to spend with those that are putting your documents together. This is an unfortunate misunderstanding of a detail. Let's keep going, Matthew.
Jim, as we move on, I just wanted to comment. We have talked over the years about a lot of things, and I really can't remember a time that we've touched on the appropriate time to make a site visit. And we might address that in a future seminar. That last slide, it was a small stair, but imagine if that was so. To correct that is not going to be that big a deal, but imagine if that was a major pour over a larger area. And the time to have caught that would have been when the formwork was done, before the concrete was poured, not after. And so as you are making your site visits, working with the team, you need to look at what's coming up. What are they going to be doing next week? What are they going to be doing 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out? And plan to make your visits at strategic times to where you can do the most good and prevent issues rather than identify them after they've happened, so that you are ahead of the game and saving the contractor and the owner and yourself time and money, as opposed to being reactive. You need to take a proactive approach.
That's such a great message, and something that we have often multiple tools to find a way to do that. For example, on some projects, you will have required in your general conditions a schedule that is perhaps manpower loaded and perhaps money loaded to help your client know at what points they may see substantial pay applications come in. It's a great opportunity, as Doug just said, to find places where there may be times when you need to be on the job site even more than you may otherwise. We're doing large pours here of complicated portions of the building. This is a time when we need to be at the site early and often as that formwork goes into place. It's a great point, and Doug and I talk about this frequently as well. This is a team thing, and sadly, we often don't find ourselves working as a team. It becomes maybe adversarial, maybe really fast, and it's sad. We're both sad when that happens. Sometimes it does, and you just can't help it. But if you go at this as a team, certainly the contractor is going to appreciate that engagement early to keep them from making mistakes. They certainly don't make money by doing work and undoing work and doing it more than once. So you have a chance to build a rapport in offering to be there, as Doug described, to look at things early. And gosh, don't be afraid to look at them closely. I think that's another thing that often happens is we're a little concerned about getting in over our heads or taking on too much liability or responsibility in looking in detail at various pieces of formwork or other kinds of rough-in. And I don't want to leave that, Doug, until you have a chance to follow up, but it also sort of leads into this opportunity to have mock-ups in the field, which is another way to work out details and to look at materials and how they're going to come together and how they act. Doug, do you have any other things? And then Matthew, any questions?
Just to add on, in addition to not being afraid to look closely, don't be afraid to ask questions. Talk to the people that are out there actually doing the work, especially if you are not experienced or not experienced in that trade or activity that's going on at the time. And also use your resources back in your office if you're not as experienced out in the field and you find yourself out on a job site doing construction administration. Take good pictures, go back to your office, sit down with the people that have the experience, the people that design the project, review with them the pictures, and get their input on what is taking place on the job site. Communication can solve a whole host of issues during construction, and that is communication with the design team, amongst the design team and their consultants, with the owner, with the contractor, with the authorities having jurisdiction, with the material suppliers, with the end users. You need to make sure that that communication happens.
Matthew, any raised hands?
Just one at the moment. It says, yes, but must balance against directing the contractor. We usually want to be performance-based, i.e. the product, not the methods.
That's right. Great point. Certainly don't want to take over the means and methods, and you're right. It has to be balanced. Well, as we keep moving here, let's go to the next slide, Matthew, and these mock-ups and materials that are in place, depending on locations in the building. Doug and I both encourage a robust front-end set of documents in your specifications, front-end information, general conditions, supplementary general conditions, specification sections for various things that you want to see as important components to your design. So don't be afraid to, as you develop these details, develop details for mock-ups that you want to see and you want to see tested, particularly if you're using something that you're not necessarily as familiar with, a metal panel or now a terracotta panel, which we're seeing a resurgence of in North Carolina. These are opportunities to not only test what you intend on doing, but also to perhaps leave them as a permanent part of the project. And I've seen that happen more frequently in the recent past, so that you are able to take a component and spend a copious amount of time creating the details for exactly how you want that to work, and then see it actually function. So we've worked with firms that, for example, require walls to be filled with water and measurements of time for that water to get out of the walls, measurement of moisture percentages within the walls. All of this is a part of specification sections and detailed drawings for what components are supposed to look like within the building. So don't be afraid of that. And also, and then I'll hush for a minute, don't be afraid to say, no, this is not the material. I understand that you used, for example, flexible flashing here in this mock-up because you had it on site. And that's not what's going to be in the wall when you actually construct it. And you'll have the right material here when you actually construct it. But I understand we're all in a hurry to get moving, so yes, that's okay for right now. And I hope Doug will speak a little bit to that. When you say this is a mock-up wall and you specify the materials that are supposed to be used in the project, stick with that. Of course, be sure you're thinking about the time it's going to take to acquire those mock-up materials for the contractor to be able to put that wall up for you to be, and the owner to be able to approve it. But so there's a schedule impact, but be sure that when you've said this is what the wall construction needs to be, that's what you see in the field. And we'll talk some more about those mock-up opportunities in a minute, but let me be quiet and see if Doug wants to add here.
Jim, that's especially important if you are going to use that mock-up for testing purposes. Because if you have a different material in the mock-up than what was specified and what you anticipate in getting in the building, you don't need to test it, because the test results are not going to be true to accurate to what you're going to get. So that is when it's especially important. But I would say not even just when you are going to be testing the mock-up. I would say any mock-up, because that's the definition of a mock-up. It's a representation of what the end result's going to be. Not this is it, except for we're going to use spray foam instead of rigid board. So, as Jim said, if the material is not right, then the mock-up is not right. I would encourage you to keep the mock-ups on site where they can be used as a reference throughout the course of construction. You have projects that typically have long durations, and people come and go, and the person or one of the persons or people that worked on the mock-up may not be there for the entire project, and so whoever is replacing that person, if that mock-up is there as a reference, they can use it as a tool to help understand what your expectations are. Another point. So, I'm sorry, Jim. I'm going to make one more point, and then I'm going to be quiet. I like to have the mock-ups kind of show a progression. So if you're doing a mock-up and you got, like in the example here on the screen, you got block, you got your cavity insulation, your ties, your brick. If you were to do it where you kind of do cutaways of each layer, you can see when you look at the mock-up how each layer works and goes together, as opposed to doing it as a complete block wall where you can't see those layers because of the layers that are in front of it. So that's one thing I like to do when I have mock-ups built, so then people can go back and look to see how they were put together.
Absolutely. Matthew, are there any questions right now?
No questions, just one comment came in here indicating front end is pretty bad in our templates, etc. Definitely recommend following CSI standards on front end production, not just dumping into one general conditions garbage dump. There are sections for each given topic. Use master format and index for these proper locations.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm sorry I wasn't being clear. I think that is a much better way to put a set of documents together as you just described, and not having just a massive dump into supplementary general conditions. I think it speaks to your forethought in a project to have a section that is a specification section that talks about the punch list and that phase and what goes on and how it's handled. As rudimentary as that might seem to others, it shows that you've given great thought to the beginning and conclusion of the project. So I agree, absolutely. Well, if there aren't any others, Matthew, let's keep moving through the slide. So if you're it just points to ponder, certainly look at other installations that you see for comparison of not only what details you may consider using, but how you should share and show those details to the construction portion of your team, especially if you're working on any kind of prototype process where you are fortunate enough to have an owner that wants to reuse you as a part of the team and your documents as further projects for their final ownership. You may have figured out exactly how to do these details and have great solutions, or others that are part of your team that have come in from other offices or other locations may have additional information to add to your details that are good solutions. So don't be afraid to be open to looking at everyone's ideas and inclusion into your solutions, because there may be some good ones that you would miss otherwise. Let's go to the next slide. Also, as you're developing these details, don't overlook things that, again, may seem like they're understood in the means and methods part of construction. Don't assume that they are, because you may have standards that you can memorialize in your documents, have them as office standards, and keep them as standards and not run into surprises. So whether that's wall types that are more friendly to penetrations, whether it's the penetration details themselves, or whether it's prompts for your field visits to be sure that you are looking in places at stages of the work. So this goes back to what Doug was saying about form work before things are installed. Later then, as things continue to be installed, where are there areas that may be covered up? And let's take a look at those before they do get covered up and are so expensive and time consuming to find and or repair. So those are pieces of documentation that you can include that will inform a much smoother construction process in the field. Doug, anything to add there?
Nothing to add, Jim.
Okay. Matthew, let's go to the next slide then. So, various kinds of details in various locations are critical for you to include. And if you don't get over there at the end of the process where it's a messy thing to have to figure out, and you just say penetrate roof here, then perhaps those penetrations might be done just like they were on the last job that someone left, rather than the kinds of penetrations that your client may want to see, take ownership of, and have to maintain for the life of their structure. Matthew, any questions? Or Doug, anything to add?
Nothing for me, Jim.
Okay. Well, Matthew, let's move on then to the next slide. So the point here, and we're going to have some extra time for conversation and questions or anything to follow up, but the point here is this is not a straight race. This is not a drag strip. This is not a get from receiving the project from the owner to straight down the path to getting finished. Take your time, meander through this process as best you can to take the road course. Focus on those curves and those corners where things are very complex, very complicated, where you have to pay particular attention and care to figure out before you put that in someone else's hands to figure out for you. And so that your details are well defined and your client is happy in the end. You figured out exactly what you wanted to see, and you've been able to oversee that to conclusion. So, Matthew, we can go to the next slide, and if there are any questions to go back and touch on, we'd love to go over those right now.
We do not have any questions that have come in at this point. I'm not sure if there's anything else you and Doug wanted to talk about. We still do have about 4 minutes left in the scheduled time for today.
Sure, Doug, anything you want to put out there for pondering?
Well, we are getting close to wrapping up this series of discussions, so I will throw out again. If anyone has any topics that they would like for us to discuss in the future, any ideas for future meetings, please contact myself or Jim. Our email addresses will show up on the last slide, or you can contact Matthew and let us know. We appreciate your participation and appreciate your input and love to hear from you.
Yeah, especially if there are hot topics that you may find in your community that are underway, that are ongoing. They may involve political issues or regulations that you're starting to see. Those are some that we'd love to talk about to compare to things that are happening in our neck of the woods. And also, I think, Doug, you brought up a great idea to talk about when is the right time to make a site observation and how you work that into the life of the job. So that's one for considering. So as Doug said, and then I'll hush, anything that you'd like to put out on the table for discussion, we certainly would love to hear from you. Matthews, back to you.
All right. Well, we'll stay on here for just a few more seconds, but I did also want to say to everybody, CSI's annual meeting will be happening in Austin, Texas, in about 2.5 weeks. For those of you that are going to be in the area or planning on attending Construct, please feel free to stop by the CSI booth. I will be there all 3.5 days of the show. We'd love to meet you. We can talk about the practice group in general, or maybe if you have any other questions or topics you'd like us to address in the future. I'd love to hear from you on that, as well as there will be a couple of surprises in the booth that will probably then be announced later for this group related to CSI's upcoming new website and some new features we're looking to install. With that, again, just a reminder to everybody, following the end of today's session, the GoToWebinar system will send you an automated message thanking you for attending. You can simply just reply to that email to let me know if you'd like a PDF of a CEU certificate for self-reporting. Again, that's for self-reporting. CSI does not submit these practice groups for credit with any other organization due to the open mic nature of the session and not ensuring if we would necessarily meet on time or if we would go off topic, but they are available for anybody that would like to self-report for the hour of session that you have just attended. With that, I will leave it to to Jim and Douglas to wrap up with a final thank you, and we look forward to seeing you next month as we count down to number 3.
Yeah, Matthew, would you go back one slide and let's put that topic back up. Next month we're going to talk about timeliness and how important that is to the construction practice and the implementation of our documents out in the field. So that'll be best practice number 3, and we'll center on timeliness. If there's anything you'd like to have us discuss specifically about time as it relates to projects, certainly send that to us as well. And I'll pass it over to Doug. Thank you very much for being with us and for your participation. It makes it all the better, and I certainly learn every time I'm with you, so thank you for being involved. Doug?
Thanks, everyone. We hope to see you next month.